This is part two of the mini series that we started about a week ago, just talking about the process that we're taking people through during this difficult time. So it's the same process we've done for years, and we've worked with hundreds of clients as we've gone through, from start to finish in terms of just their financial planning needs, what they're looking at, and overcoming a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the questions about, how can we formulate a plan. And now it's really accelerated. How do we formulate a plan during this very difficult time, right? So we're seeing a lot of people that may have been on the fence before in terms of, where am I at? And now they've been forced to start making some form of decision or bringing some form of clarity to the forefront so they can properly plan going forward. So with today's show, I want to really bring out and highlight step two of the process we talked about last week. And I shared an example of Pam's story and just the process that we took her through. And step two is really laying out or mapping everything out that you have. And if you take a step back and just think about yourself and think about all the complexities that can come up day to day and everything that's just out there for a normal person, right? You may have a mortgage. Life is really, really busy. You have a mortgage. You might have some outstanding debt, whether that be through credit cards or through just a car loan, home equity line of credit, just these different forms of debt. And what we see through a pandemic or we see through large events like this is people, as cash flow is short, especially if you're laid off or furloughed, right? They tend to go to different vehicles to just survive, right? And credit cards have high interest rates, right? So you really need to make sure that you're approaching that scenario and taking the proper steps to protect yourself so you're not paying a huge amount of interest going forward and really getting buried in that. So looking at the debts that you have and making sure the interest rates you have are the most efficient and most attractive going forward, and then formulating a plan on how to pay that off. So one of the exercises we work through is we just say, when do we want to be debt free by? And we reverse engineer that and back the math out and say, okay, this is the date in which we want to be debt free. This is how much we need to be paying towards the mortgage, towards the credit cards, towards the home equity, and finding out if debt consolidation makes sense or otherwise just continuing to attack what's already in place. Looking at life insurance, right? Obviously looking at your beneficiaries for your life insurance policies, your 401k. Most people, when they come to us, they might have a current 401k and then 2 or 3 401ks from prior jobs that they've just really put out of their mind. So, in terms of when Pam and I sat down together and we started to go through this, she had a mortgage, she had some small credit cards, she had a small existing home equity line of credit that she's been paying off for an addition that she put on a few years ago. We had the life insurance conversation, and then it's just looking at all the investments and in what she's going to have for that future income, right? So most people do a really, really good job of accumulating assets, right? So we're taught at a very young age to set it and forget it, right? So save money out of each paycheck into your 401k, put money into your Roth IRAs, have a really healthy emergency fund. These are things that people have heard before, right? Pay down your debts, right? It's easier said than done, number one. But number two, where it's really difficult is changing your mindset from that accumulation mode, right? Saving, and now transitioning into retirement or transitioning into the unknown with this pandemic and being furloughed or laid off and saying, how do I take income in the most effective way, whether it be for a period of time or the rest of your life if you're going to retire? So, when we look down through, we really need to peel back the layers of the onion and say, this is everything that I have financially. I know where I am, I know where I want to go, and then start laying the roadmap that says how we're going to get there. So I'll show you an example. We took all of this information after we sat down through that discovery meeting, got to know Pam. Obviously, I can't show you Pam's information, but here's a sample. This is Bob and Jane Doe, and this is exactly what you saw on the last slide. I'm just going to go a little further into detail. And ultimately, we laid out all of those what ifs in a very clean, clear, and easy to follow process. And what we're doing during this meeting is we're laying out everything that the client has, and we're going through it one by one. So current salaries or current incomes that they have coming in, right? And we're rating on a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are they that that job will be there 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? When do they want to retire? What does that look like, right? From once we've established that for both the husband and wife, we start to look at the other income sources. So in this example, Bob has a pension that will kick in at his age 65, right? So we're game planning. We know that over $2,000 a month will be coming in from his pension. We need to build that into the plan, which will be another series here coming up. And then we're looking at Social Security, right? There's hundreds of ways for a married couple to take Social Security, hundreds of options. So it's just dissecting what's the most efficient route, where's your break even with Social Security going forward. And all we're doing is we're starting to answer those questions, right? Those questions that are out there that seem daunting, that seem overwhelming. We're bringing clarity to the situation and then starting to answer those what if questions to allow you to make your decisions going forward. Another thing that we run into a lot is when we start highlighting, 401ks or IRAs, we really just want to make sure that your beneficiaries are in place and in good order, right? There's many times where I've seen, a person is recently married and never updated their beneficiaries, or went through a divorce and still has their ex-spouse listed as a beneficiary. That's a huge mess that you don't want to get into if you don't have to. And obviously with this pandemic, you really want to make sure that those are in place and those are listed correctly. In addition to that, you want to make sure that they're working effectively for you, right? You're obviously not going to want to be invested the same way if you're 50 years old that you were when you were 25 years old. And what we run into is many people with their 401ks, like I stated before, it's a set and forget mentality, right? Just put it away, save it, save it, save it. And over the long run, for many people through dollar cost averaging, right, that pays off for you. But the closer that you get to a distribution phase, right, where you're going to be taking income from your portfolio, you need to restructure how you go about looking at that, right? What's going to provide you with income for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years needs to be treated differently than something that you might not touch for another 25, 30, God willing, 40 years into retirement. So in terms of just looking at the goals of all of the underlying investments, you need to start having that discussion and then really assessing what is your goal with life insurance, right? Do you have long-term care if you were in a nursing home or a loved one was in a nursing home? What is the goal with the life insurance? Is it to pass on a legacy to your loved ones? Is it to pay off debts? It's really putting a purpose behind what you're paying for in terms of that insurance. From there, what we start assessing then is the after-tax accounts. And this is actually where we run into the most amount of snags or things that people need to look at. I can't even tell you how many times I sit down with a client and it's a husband and a wife and they have an account that's listed individually in one of their names. So it happens a lot with individuals that might have a stock option plan at work or some form of restricted stock unit. Well, that qualified plan is only in the working, the spouse that is working at that company's name. So in this example, let's say Bob had restricted stock units through a company. Well, that company is paying those to Bob, not to Jane in this example, right? So if Bob were to pass away and doesn't have a beneficiary listed on that account, that will go through probate, and that's something you definitely want to avoid. So we take a look at that and make sure that they're registered correctly, number one. But number two, we also want to make sure that they're diversified and they're having the conversation about aligning with their goals for the future, just like what we talked about. And then we take it a step further and we start assessing any debts that are out there. So you can see in this example, they only have about $54,000 remaining on their mortgage, and the house is worth about $350,000. But really, we're assessing what is the goal. Does Bob and Jane in this example plan on moving, within the next 2 or 3 years? Do they plan on staying in the house forever? Do we want to pay off that debt? So there's a whole conversation that goes with that, and then finding the most efficient route to pay that debt off, whether it be credit cards, home equity lines of credit, etc., and outlining it step by step. So that second step that we talked about in this mini series is just starting to lay everything out. I understand that people are extremely busy, right? We have a lot going on in life, whether it be raising kids, just work, everything. And then to expect to be able to handle all of the complexities and intricacies in terms of your finances is a whole nother burden to shoulder. So we lay everything out, we map it out in a very easy to follow fashion. We start having a great conversation on what your current goals are and then how to achieve them with your current finances. So stay tuned. We're going to do another mini series here, which is a step further, and that's going to be laying out the plan, how we do the inputs, how we come up with what the ultimate goal is in terms of retirement planning. So I'm real excited to share that with you here in the near future. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time, right? That's what we're here for. We're here to help you through this. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us and stay tuned for our next video. Thank you.